This week on Personally Speaking, our guest is the Tony Award winning actress Debbie Gravitte. Please stay with us. Hello and welcome to Personally Speaking. I'm your host, Msgr Lisante, and Tony Award-winning actress and singer Debbie Gravitte joins me now. Debbie received the Tony Award for her critically acclaimed performance in Jerome Robbins' Broadway. She made her Broadway debut in the original cast of They're Playing Our Song and went on to appear in Blues in the Night, Perfectly Frank, Zorba, Chicago, and Les Miserables. Debbie has performed her nightclub act worldwide, from New York's Rainbow and Stars, Birdland, 54 Below, to London's Pizza on the Park. She recently toured with her partner David Lawrence in A Toast to Steve and Edie. Debbie has sung with over 200 orchestras worldwide, and she's featured on many recordings, including her 4 solo CDs. She considers her greatest achievement her 3 beautiful children. She's here with us today to talk about her life, her career, her family, and the values that mean the most to her. Joining me now, I'm so pleased to welcome to Personally Speaking the wonderful actress and singer Debbie Gravitte. Before we get to our interview with Debbie, let's listen to her sing. This is Debbie singing It Might As Well Be Spring.
I'm as restless as a willow in a windstorm. I'm as jumpy as a puppet on a string. I'd say that I had spring fever, but I know it isn't spring. I am starry-eyed and vaguely...
Debbie, thanks for coming on. And I have to tell you, I'm one of millions of people around the world, around the country, who have done plays in grammar school, high school, college. But that was an avocation, something I enjoyed doing, but I knew it wasn't going to be my life. For Debbie Gravitte, when did you decide this isn't an avocation, just a thing I want to do on the side? Being an entertainer, being an actress, being a singer, I want to do that with my life. When did it become a vocation instead of an avocation?
Well, I always think of when I was 13. When I was 13, I very clearly, I wanted to be 2 things. I either wanted to be an Olympic swimmer or I wanted to be a star on Broadway. And I was 13 and I had a race. It was a freestyle race and there were 2 of us in the race. And thank God I won the race. And I never want to do that again because it's way too much work. So that was sort of the turning point. And I did a show when I was 13. I got a lot of sort of a lot of stuff said about me.
Right.
But this is, growing up in Los Angeles, California. So it's a little different. And anyway, yeah, that was, I guess, when I think about like the pinpoint moment, but I always wanted to be on Broadway, always. And I grew up in Los Angeles, home to movie stars and TV stars. And here I am, little Debbie Shapiro, wanted to be, a Broadway star.
Debbie Shapiro Gravitte is also somebody who has a family like all of us do. She comes from a family of origin. So, Debbie, when you're saying to your parents, I think most parents I know want their kids to have something steady, some job they can count on, a nice pension, some sense of security. What was your parents' reaction to, no, I'm going to go in the creative arts?
Honestly, I don't remember them like, I guess sort of speaks to the communication in our house, which maybe wasn't fabulous now that I think about it. But I think it was more like, oh, that's a great idea. I don't think they couldn't really conceive. My mom was a frustrated singer. My dad was a CPA. They were both from sort of humble background. And even though I found out years later, my father served in World War II, and he was in show business in World War II.
Ah,
So go
okay.
figure. He never said anything to me about it. But I think that for them, it didn't, it was nonplus
Mm-hmm.
until I started to have success. And then of course, they were really proud of me. Of
Yeah.
course. But I
Yeah.
don't think at the time, I mean, listen, this is many years ago. And, I was a girl, I was a female. It was like, well, she'll just get, married and have children. And of course, that was so far from my brain. And of course, then that is what happened to me. And it's the best thing that ever happened. But
Yeah.
that's many questions from now. So carry
Right,
on.
right, right. Let me ask you too, because for those who don't know, Debbie Gravitte is also a Tony Award winner. She's been on Broadway, she said, very successful. But when you said before, the swimming thing was too hard. I'm thinking doing 8 performances a week on Broadway is no walk in the park either. So tell us how, night after night. I remember taking a kid, it was his first Broadway play, and he was like mesmerized by seeing you guys up there. And I thought to myself, that's great for tonight for him. But every night, these folks have to get up there as if they're performing for the first time for that kid who's never been to a Broadway show. How do they keep the
Exactly.
dynamic energy alive? How do you, time after time, find a way to get on that stage and do the same piece over and over in a way that makes it fresh? How does Debbie do it?
Well, first of all, you have to sort of hope and pray that you have a fantastic director. And for
Mm,
the most part, I worked with incredible directors. And the material has to be fantastic. And then you have to do all that training that gives you the foundation to show up every night with a warmed up voice and a warmed up body and a warmed up heart to receive it all. And sorry, that's really rude, isn't it? Go away. Um, life goes on. Um, so I think that's what, people speak about technique.
hmm
For the theater, you really, really need it. It's so interesting. My husband got very close to getting something, a show, where he was going to have to sing. And he doesn't think of himself as a singer. He has an incredible voice, beautiful voice, but he's not a trained singer. And he was really nervous. He ended up not getting the show, but he was really nervous about having to sort of train from the beginning
hmm
so that he could sustain the 8 shows a week. I mean, even what I'm going to do at Adelphi, that's a whole evening. You're not singing one song, you're singing 20 songs, 18 songs.
Right.
It's a lot. So there has to be this foundation of training.
hmm
I don't, I mean, listen, there's so many people who are just incredibly talented and you sort of throw them out there and they figure it out, but they probably won't be there 8 shows a week.
Yeah.
I did, I went into Chicago, the
Uh-huh.
Broadway show. It was the last, it's actually the last Broadway show I did. And it's been a while. And I did it. I rehearsed with Patrick Swayze, may he rest in peace. He did either 2 or 3 performances and he said, I'm sorry, I can't do this.
Wow.
He could not sustain the 8 show a week narrative, basically.
Yeah.
And that wasn't his training. Just wasn't his training. You go on a movie set and you just like, yeah, you have to do it, but it's different. It's really different.
Yeah. Debbie, when you spend those hours on the stage, that's one form of energy output. But I've been noticing whenever I go to see a Broadway play that it takes almost as much energy now to do the stage door because you have tons of people who now want to meet the people they just saw. Um, what's your relationship like over the years with very well-intentioned fans, but who expect so much from you, even after you've just given them your best on stage?
Well, that's a two-parter. First of all, I think now fans have become more rabid. They have. They have. Because with the internet, they think they know everything about you and they want to know everything about you, and then they also want to be part of you. So they need to take a picture with you, and they want to take a picture with their friends with you, and the machinery of fame and show business is all sort of wrapped up in self-promotion. So it's sort of like this loop that you get in. So if you do a show and you want to be a good person and you want to, have a good following, you have to get out there and say hello to your fans
Mhm.
and do all that. Um, it's funny because, obviously during COVID, you couldn't do that and sort of
Right.
really changed the narrative of it. But it's a fascinating thing. It's fascinating. It's fascinating to me because of the new of what social media
Yeah.
has done to that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just going to prattle on.
No,
But
no,
you're
no, you're not prattling. You're making great sense. You mentioned a few moments ago, Debbie Gravitte is our guest, great actress, great singer, great dancer, great everything, and beautiful. But I'll come back to that in a minute. You mentioned that, as a young person, your family probably expected to get married, have kids, and that's wonderful. You said it was the best thing that ever happened to you. Every weekend, I get the chance to do the weddings for people. And to make it more personal, I always say to each bride and groom, in your own words, in essay form, tell me why, of the billion people out there, why is this the one you think you can build a life with? When you
mm,
look back on your relationship with Bo, what did he have that made you say, I can build a life with this guy?
wow, that's a really great question. Well, humor,
Okay.
humor, compassion.
Mm.
Uh, we're so different. We come from such different backgrounds, but we're so like-minded in so many ways. It's kind of crazy. We've been married for 38 years.
That's great.
38 years. So I get to say these things. Um, our worldview is similar. I mean,
Mhm.
there's so many things. He knew about my talent right away. He loved my talent because that was a huge part of me when we first met, because I was just like I'm no longer like that. I mean, I am a little bit. There's like a maybe not a, multiple of that, but um I think that so much of it, it's so funny. Obviously, I can say these things all in retrospect now, but
Yeah.
sometimes people say, what are those two doing together? Well, I
Right.
see what she sees in him or he sees in her. There is, I really believe there is a chemistry that happens that you cannot quantify. You can't measure. You can't put your finger on what attracts us
Yeah.
to certain humans. And I mean, as you know, as you do this week in and week out, and I'm sure a couple times you've gone, what are those
Right.
two doing together? It's okay. I
Uh-huh.
won't tell anybody if you have.
Yeah.
But it is a fascinating thing. I mean, the older I get, I'm amazed at it.
And here you are, 38 years in, and still loving the guy and still building life with him, which is in your business an amazing thing too, especially when two people are in the same craft. Now, you mentioned 38 years being married, and I'm thinking to myself, Debbie, that last year I was 30, and now suddenly I'm 70, and I'm saying, I'm saying, what happened? The whole process of aging, which if we're alive is a wonderful thing, keeps us here. But when you're in your world, where and I know that in the arts the youth thing is so celebrated, and aging is sometimes cast aside. So, how do you process the reality that we're all here? As long as we're here, we're going to age, and that's just part of life. To handle it with grace and dignity, how does Debbie Gravitte handle the reality of all of us aging?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Uh, you know, it's 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 a very it's a very odd road. Of course, I go, wow, should I do this and tuck and lift and do things? And it completely terrifies me. And I see so many people who do it and have done it. And I'm so afraid of losing my essence. And I know
Hmm.
I know I've aged pretty well. It's a genetic, jackpot, whatever it is. Um, I think that if we just, keep taking good care of ourselves and stay out of the sun
Right.
and wear sunblock. Um, you know, that's a really philosophical thing that we could go on for hours on, but grace, that's so funny. I literally wrote to my children the other day for my birthday that I wanted to give them the gift of grace
Mm,
because I I feel so strongly about all of us understanding that we are to be the best version of ourselves is all we can be. We, especially in show business, you know, you go in for an audition and that day they want the person with the blue eyes. They
yeah.
don't want the person with the brown eyes. It might have nothing to do with anything. What do you do about that?
Right. Right.
You didn't know to put in blue contacts that day or whatever. You
Right.
can't, we can't really change our essence. We can change stuff about ourselves, and to have grace to plow through and navigate life and show business with that. I just think that that's, obviously if 30 years ago somebody had said that to me, I would be like, "What? That's so smart." But, nobody did say that to me. So I just had to, you have to learn it. And I don't know if you can learn that when you're 20 years old. I just, I don't know.
Right. Debbie Gravitte, our guest. Debbie, one of the things I remember doing years ago was reading the autobiography of Katharine Hepburn. Interestingly enough, the book was called Me. And she says, I did not choose to have children because she said children are a commitment to selflessness. And to be honest, she said, I can be a fairly selfish person. I wanted a great career, and that didn't leave room for marriage and family. Debbie Gravitte is not only a wonderful actress and singer and dancer and all the rest of it, but she and her husband have created these three wonderful children and built a family life. I got to ask you, like somewhere along the line, you had to make a conscious decision. I do want to be successful in my craft. I also want family. And how does anyone do it all?
Well, I think that I am the beneficiary of the women before me
Mm,
who wanted to have it all, but really couldn't because society, nature, I don't really, I can't really put my finger on that, but there was no way. First of all, I never really did think about having children because I wanted so much of my career. So I was, like this.
yeah.
And then I met Bo. I met, my husband to be, and we got married. And then we said, let's get a dog and see how we do with the dog. And we did okay with the dog. Then we went, well, let's see how we do with a kid. And, it was a natural progression. In terms of the business part of it,
Mm,
I was saying earlier that Chicago was the last Broadway show I did. I was very conscious when I was doing 8 shows a week that I was missing out on seeing my kids.
yeah.
My kids are very sporty, great. They're all great athletes. And I was missing that every weekend. And I just went, I don't want to do that anymore.
Mm,
So I made a conscious decision, but I also was very lucky because I was doing a lot of concerts at the time. So I just stayed in the concert world. Now you'll say, well, but isn't that every weekend? It wasn't every weekend.
hmm.
It was many weekends, but I wasn't missing everything and I was around more during the week. So that was a conscious decision, which then maybe I missed out on some. I know I did.
Hmm.
I missed out on many things because then I was committed to doing these concerts.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be the person going, no, I can't do it because I'm going to go do this or that. So I did make a very conscious decision. And, now I'm sort of like, my kids are grown up and I'm available now, I keep saying.
Right, right. When recently we had Kelly O'Hara on, she said the only way she could do what she does is because she had this incredibly generous husband who was there for the kids. How did Bo take the fact that sometimes when Debbie was on the road, he had to step into the job and become mom and dad to the kids?
Well, first of all, I don't think any person can be mom and dad. I
Yeah,
don't. I think,
yeah,
he's an incredible father.
right,
And I mean, that's semantics. But I think, you know, I- we stepped in for each other when we both needed to.
hmm
We have three children. You have to have money to have raise three children. So it also becomes like, who's working this weekend or who's working this week? So it was sort of seamless who stepped in at times. Uh, and again, balance, balance, balance. I think it's just so important for any relationship. There has to be a balance somewhere. And sometimes, you have to put the big, weight in one side to lift the other.
right.
But I think that was the case with both of us.
You
And I
know, Debbie.
remember,
No, go ahead. Please, please
no,
speak.
no, I remember saying to my daughter one day, did you mind when I worked so much? She said, oh, I loved it. I loved it. And I just, you can't believe the relief that washed over me.
Yeah.
But, she was so proud of what I did. And that I just remind, I have a very good friend who's a performer who's going through it. She has two young kids, and I constantly remind her of my daughter saying that your kids are going to be, as long as you're present, when you're around them, as opposed to like you're on the phone or you're doing other stuff. But, we just have to be present for when we're around our children. So,
Debbie Gravitte, who is a wonderful actress in person, has these three great kids. Now, Debbie, let me ask you this. You talk so glowingly about them, but let's be specific. What's so wonderful about those kids of yours, Debbie Gravitte?
what is so wonderful about those kids? Um, well, I like to say their humanity. They're
Ah,
good, they're great people. They're also really talented and multifaceted and uh I'll start with my oldest is just like the greatest guy. Everybody wants to hang out with him. I have twins, and my twin daughter is an incredible filmmaker who everybody wants to work with her. She's about to blast off into the universe with her first feature,
ah,
and uh and her twin brother, uh he's been on Broadway. He's a writer. He teaches. They're just great people.
I promised the last question. Debbie Gravitte's our guest, wonderful actress. Catch her concert or wherever she performs. Debbie, I'm presuming that with a name originally like Debbie Shapiro, that you're not an Irish Catholic. So, having admitted that, like, what's the background spiritually, and do you bring the spiritual into your life at all? And tell us about that. You're here with a Catholic priest. I'm going to ask spirituality
Of
question.
course you are.
Yeah.
That's okay. Listen, do you know how many Catholic churches I've been spending time in? Lighting candles, saying prayers, just a little give back to you.
Wow.
Um, um, I I mean, we could spend hours and hours on this. I was raised as a nice Jewish girl in Los Angeles, California, but we were not religious. I
Okay.
think of myself as a spiritual Jew.
Okay.
I finally did Fiddler on the Roof a couple of years
Oh,
ago. I've never done it, and I'd always sort of like avoided it, or it avoided me. But I did this incredible production with this European director for Chicago Lyric Opera, and it was a spectacular production which co-starred the incredible Stephen Skybell as Tevye. And what's funny is he said, "Do you know you're my first Jewish Golda?" I went, "How is that possible?"
Right.
But you ask me spiritually, it obviously led me circuitously back to my Jewish.
Mm,
I don't know if I can say faith, to be honest with you,
yeah.
but I think, as so many Jewish people are, we're confused by it all.
Yeah.
It's a confusing, it is a confusing thing. We went, "Oh my God, this is not how you want to end your show," but as part of our trip here, we did go visit Auschwitz-Birkenau,
Oh boy.
and I came away from there thinking, not in any religious way, but as a human, how everybody must visit that place.
Yeah.
Talk about humanity or man's inhumanity.
Hmm.
Anyway, that's a very long,
No,
windy
no, no.
answer to
That's a
your
great
question.
answer. I've always been happy that I think every pope in recent memory has made their way to Auschwitz, and it's always
Yeah,
a lesson for all of us to be conscious of what man is capable of doing to a fellow man. And know what you're saying.
exactly.
Spirituality is great. I perform many interfaith weddings, Catholic, Jewish, and what you're talking about is a common experience I have of both Catholics and Jews saying, "I'm culturally into my faith. I'm, traditionally into my faith." The faith part of it is a challenge for a lot of people, but you have navigated it beautifully, and thank you so
Thank
much. I
you.
want to thank Debbie Gravitte for being with us. As I mentioned early on, great actress, great singer, dancer, beautiful, all that stuff. But what we saw and heard today, I think, on Personally Speaking, is this warm, engaging, delightful person. Debbie, I've said this often, but so many guests come on our program over the 30 years we're doing this, and they give canned answers. And I love that there's a spontaneity about you where you think before you speak and you're radically honest. And I deeply appreciate that. All the best to you, Debbie, and your beautiful family and your wonderful
Thank you so
husband.
much.
Thanks for being with us on Personally Speaking. If you need to reach me for any reason, you can do that at personallyspeakingpodcast@gmail.com. You probably listened to this program on the Catholic channel, 129. And you can do more than that. You can watch it as well on YouTube if you like by searching under Personally Speaking with Msgr Jim Lisante. We're also on Facebook at Personally Speaking with Msgr Jim Lisante. We're on Instagram at Personally Speaking Podcast. Please share and let others know about Personally Speaking. I'm delighted to serve as host and executive producer of Personally Speaking. Our producer is Lisa Jandovitz. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be with you again next time on Personally Speaking.